Some of you may have had a rough year, and it's going to be nice to kind of leave that and move into the new year. So let's see. They're also a powerful symbol of Christmas time and overcoming darkness, and just a visual representation of the human spirit's resilience. So that's why we have lanterns tonight, in case anybody was wondering. And then we'll let Sarah kick us off here. So.
Well, I'm so excited to be here with you guys. I always jump at an opportunity to collaborate with Danielle because she's awesome. So as you guys, most of you probably already know. So I'm gonna get myself comfortable here. All right. So I'm just curious, has anyone here ever heard of Redefining Love? Okay. I have a handout that I'm going to just start passing around, and I will explain it in a little bit. But I'll go ahead and just take one and pass it around. Thank you. So, as Danielle said, I am Sara Beth Wald. I am the founder of Redefining Love, and I also, I'm going to move this so that those folks over there can see my face, because I like to sit on the stool. I don't know, my brain works better when I'm sitting down, it's weird. I am the founder of Redefining Love, which is a mindset framework that helps people deal with their high conflict relationships. And it's built on the 3 pillars of boundaries, accountability, and grace, which we will talk a little bit more about. But the goal of Redefining Love is to teach us how to set firm, loving boundaries with people that we have complicated relationships with. Complicated relationships that often kind of rear their heads during holidays. Lots to celebrate during the holidays, but also sometimes complication too when it comes to those tricky relationships. Storytelling is the foundation of all healing. Storytelling is also my favorite thing. It's definitely my favorite coping mechanism. I've been a writer my whole life, much more writer than a speaker. So I'm had some practice now, but I still writing is still feels like home to me. So when Danielle asked me to talk about storytelling, I was more than happy to jump in and do that. So why is storytelling so profound for us? And we've always passed stories down since the beginning of humanity. That's part of our experience. And it's incredibly healing. It's when we share our stories that we are set free from all of those past traumas that we've experienced. I'm of the belief that we all experience trauma. It's sort of a controversial statement sometimes, but there are certainly the big T traumas, which are the more classic traumas that we all think of when we hear the word trauma. And then there are the little t traumas, those small things that accumulate over time to begin to affect our worldview and how we approach life. So the cornerstone of all relationship dysfunction is secrets. I have a belief that secrets can only control us when they are kept. And when we shed light on those, such as the symbol of the lantern, when we shed light on those, we are setting ourselves and others free. And most people who have had complicated family, or either your family of origin or a relationship in your adult years, know that secrets kind of keep that ball rolling, and as soon as someone speaks up and starts to reveal those secrets, it can be difficult for those who aren't ready to take that step yet, but it can also be very, very freeing. Secrets secrets are not just things that had happened in the past that we keep to ourselves. They're also our feelings that we don't express. They are our opinions and thoughts that we don't feel safe to share in our relationships. So there are different forms of secrets. And that is how Redefining Love was born. I was really struggling myself with knowing how to make space for myself in my own complicated relationships, particularly my family of origin. There was a lot of interesting experiences in my growing up years, and everything in my life was fueled by secrets. And I had to figure out a way that I could make space for myself in my own life. And so I worked very hard in therapy, read lots and lots of books. And then as a social worker, I also and a journalist, I got really into the research of trauma's impact on our brains, on our relationships going forward. And I combined all of that and I turned it into a blog that grew and grew and grew and continues to grow, which is very exciting, where I talk about boundaries, accountability, and grace, and how those things can set us free from secrets. So a couple things about Redefining Love, just the basics. I won't dive too deep into the framework, but I do like to share it with folks, just so you have an understanding. It is a mindset framework. It is all about overcoming shame, trauma, and conflict. And I believe if we can figure out a new way to love, it allows that space that we all need to fully be ourselves. And it has nothing to do with romance. The name Redefining Love came from this idea that I needed a different way to love others. Not just in a romantic sense, but in a human sense. And because my definition of love was that it always has to be warm and fuzzy. It always has to be, if you're not feeling good, then you're not doing love right. And the truth is that the more intimate the relationship, whether it be family, parent, child relationships, are the most intimate of all. We actually share DNA with these folks. And the more intimate that relationship, the more complicated it becomes and messy it can become. And so when I was creating Redefining Love, I was trying to figure out a way to define love that allowed me to be myself and to set some boundaries and accountability for myself and for others. So it's not just about romance, it's about every interaction, even the person making your coffee. We can once you integrate the framework, you can actually make space for that in almost every interaction that you encounter. So, boundaries, accountability, and grace. These three principles, which are on that graphic that you guys have in the handout, they must be applied both inwardly toward ourselves and outwardly towards others. And I'm going to give a little example of how that works. And it's important to know too that it's not a step-by-step process. You don't begin setting boundaries and then, or hold somebody accountable and then set boundaries and then feel grace. It's different for every interaction, and you start where you're at. And I'll give a little bit of an example of that here. So, you've got your little handout, and the example that I'm going to use, since we're in the holiday season, you love the holidays, but you don't enjoy the awkward conversations with certain family members at your holiday gatherings. So that's the example we're going to use. Has anybody ever felt like that before? Probably all of you. Yeah, so in this case, I am going to start at grace for others, and this is just how I would apply it. there's not a right or wrong answer. It's more about the journey than the destination. So what this provides is just a framework, a starting point. So to get you thinking and get it outside of your own head and all of those insecurities that come up when we are faced with complicated relationships. So I'm going to start with grace for others. And I'm going to tell myself, and this is all internal, you don't even have to really apply it outward. We're all doing the best we can with the tools that we've been given, and those tools may be inadequate for people, right? So maybe they just don't have the right tools, and therefore sometimes people act like jerks because they don't know how to do life differently. I'm going to head over to grace for self then. So I'm here. I really need like the line at these bottom ones too, but you get the idea. Grace for self, you're doing the best you can too. So if you're like me, you go home in the evening, you think, oh, I should have said this. I shouldn't have said this. And you turn that over in your mind. And so I try to preempt that now, and even in the moment, I'm able to talk myself through that and think, okay, this isn't about me. They don't have the tools. They've got their own stuff. And I'm doing the best I can within that. And sometimes I handle it really great, and sometimes I wish I'd done something different, but I'm not going to beat myself up about that. So then after grace for self, I'm going to head over to accountability for others. So that's down in the corner. And what I've got here is having inadequate coping tools is not an excuse for mistreating people. So you've given them grace, and you can think to yourself, all right, they just don't have the tools. They're oblivious. They're in a triggered state. Whatever you want to, however you get to that point. But then you also remind yourself, but they don't have a right to mistreat me or anybody else simply because they don't have the tools, and however that happens for them. And then I'm going to head over to accountability for self. I'm going to remind myself that I can't control others, but I can control how I react to others. My voice wants to stop. And so that's just a really good reminder always, is that once we release that expectation, that if I do X, then Y is going to happen, and then we're going to have Z outcome. And that's just not the way relationships work. We don't have that kind of control over other people. So, but I do have to have control over myself, and I can decide if I'm going to let this ruin my day. I can decide if I'm going to scream in their face. You know, there's all these different ways of handling it. Or I can decide that I'm going to maybe put some distance between us and have a conversation with someone else. There's so many ways that you can do that you're going to be able to feel better about when you get home. So then I'm going to go up to boundaries for self, and remind myself that I deserve to be treated with respect and enjoy my holiday. And that's a little bit of a non-traditional boundary. Usually when we think about boundaries, we think stop, stop talking, stop saying, you put this barrier up. But for me, boundaries is about finding a space for yourself in every interaction and allowing that space for yourself. So by saying that I deserve to be treated with respect and enjoy my holiday, it's giving you permission to take up space. And then finally, I'm going to go over to boundaries for others, and notice that all of this stuff has been going on inside my head. None of it was an outward thing yet. So I got to boundaries for others, and this is when it can be very subtle, though. It doesn't have to be a big event where, an intervention where you're going to sit down and you're going to have this big conversation. You can say to yourself, I'm going to remove myself from conversations that make me uncomfortable. And that is a boundary kind of for both of you, right? But it's definitely a boundary, and it doesn't have to be, I'm not going to have this conversation right now. Maybe that's necessary sometimes, but a lot of times it's just a matter of deep breath, I'm going to step out of this conversation. without making a big scene about it. And I'm not going to beat myself up about it later. That feels like a boundary to yourself. But actually, a lot of times, and give me some head nods if you relate to this, a dysfunctional situation usually has a few really strong personalities that want to control the narrative. And so when you decide, I'm not going to beat myself up about this, that is releasing yourself from that guilt bond that other person is trying to put you in. And remembering, going back to the grace again, so it just keeps going. Remembering that, okay, that's where they're at right now. So we're going to give them grace for where they're at, but where they're at right now is trying to send me on a guilt trip, and I choose not to go on that guilt trip. And that might bother them, right? But that's not yours to carry. So that's just one example of how the framework works. And now I want to get back into a little bit of storytelling, since that's our theme for the day. And so, like as I said, I am a writer more than a speaker, but I'm so passionate about sharing this message with others that I've stepped outside of that comfort zone, and I still, Danielle knows this, she's asked me to write blogs, and it's still out. She very gently reminds me that I did do one, but she's like, I'd like you to go a little bit deeper and tell a little bit more of your own story. And I haven't done it yet. I don't know. I'm putting that off. So I do know that sometimes it feels really vulnerable and possibly scary. But it is so important to step into that vulnerability and share. I'm certainly better at it than I used to be. But in addition to the 3 pillars of boundaries, accountability, and grace, some other themes that are really important in redefining love are intention, curiosity, and authenticity. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what that looks like. Until we start approaching our interactions, all of our interactions, with intention, we are just running on autopilot. We're just falling into letting our subconscious brain run the show, and all of our past experiences are in charge. And what happens when we do that is all of our triggers and all of our trauma responses are the boss. And so when we start to apply intention, the framework only works if you are intentionally thinking about where to go with it. And the thing that I've found so helpful with this framework, and I really do use it in almost every interaction, as an introverted person, as someone who's not accustomed to or maybe comfortable up in front of crowds like this, for example, I can tell myself, but you know what, Sarah, these are all people too. I can give all of you grace, because when I'm in a state of anxiety, I'm actually also not giving you guys the benefit of the doubt that you're going to be a gracious and loving audience. And so it fits in every situation. But intention is required in order to get to that place. And what happens when we don't use intention and we're just running on our trauma triggers? And I know I've been in this spot, and I'm a big believer that we're all the bad guy in somebody's story, because if we just run on autopilot all the time and let our trauma do the talking for us, then we might be the toxic person in any given interaction. And I know that's been the case for myself, and so I really use this a lot to stay ahead of that, and that's that accountability for myself. So how do we get intentional? We use curiosity. Curiosity it's unbelievable to me that as I started to figure this out and look at it, that almost the closer we get to people, the less curious we become, because we're so enmeshed is a psychology word, but we're so attached to these people, and our lives are so woven together that in order to get curious about their experience, it might involve us getting vulnerable ourselves, or it might involve them coming and saying, but this, you hurt me and this is how. And so we might be avoiding that, and that's that accountability element. Or we're afraid of conflict. We don't want to have that hard conversation. And so an anecdotal observation that I've had over the years as a social worker and as a human being in relationships with others is that the closer we become, the less curious we become. And that can be dangerous. So I have a phrase that my friend William taught me years and years ago that I keep saying I'm going to get tattooed on my arm, and I haven't done it yet, but it's tell me more. And my friend William teaches in the diversity space, and that's where I first heard it within that context of, instead of, you know, just assuming that we're so different, and when we disagree with someone, if you sit down and you ask them genuinely, tell me more, it can be a very healing question, statement. And that just struck me, and I use it all the time now, and especially for an introverted person who sometimes feels socially awkward and all of those things. That phrase, tell me more, is giving me a lot of freedom in conversation, and I use it all the time. So if you know me, you know that, oh yeah, Sarah says tell me more a lot. I think it's even more powerful in some ways than I love you, because I love you gets overused in our culture, and we love coffee, we love, you know, so there's all sorts of things that we love, and but saying tell me more, it requires action. It's an actionable relational statement. Okay, and then the last one is authenticity. For me, authenticity is synonymous with integrity. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So I'm going to use may I use you as an example? Okay. I'm going to say the phrase, tell me more, 3 different times. Okay. And I want you to try to remember, and then after all 3, I want you to talk about, actually everyone can kind of throw your thoughts in there of how it makes you feel, depending on how I say tell me more. So let's see if I can channel my inner actress. I'm not an actress, but tell me more. So that's the first one. Tell me more. That's the second one. And then the third one is this. Tell me more. Tell me more about that. Okay, so the first one. Tell me more. How does that make you feel?
Seems like drama seeking, kind of.
Yes. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I agree.
Yeah.
What's the tea?
Tell me more. Oh, she said drama.
Drama.
It's a
Kind
little
of
more
like gossip.
curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of comes off as like the person is gossipy or wants
little
to
pushing.
glean more about that.
Yeah. That one for me, you know what it reminds me of? Does anybody watch Schitt's Creek? The show
Yeah,
Schitt's Creek?
sometimes.
Yeah, and I love Alexis is the sister, and if you've never watched it, it's a great show. But that's sort of her, like, tell me more. That's what it reminds me of. And it's sort of like, I'm only half listening and I don't really care. But, you know, I know I'm supposed to be curious about you, so I'm going to feign interest. So it doesn't really feel authentic. And then the second one, tell me more.
Excitement.
Yes,
Joy.
it could be excitement and joy, yeah. But it's a little bit different feel, isn't it? That one also I kind of associate with gossip,
Right.
you know, like
Maybe
you're
too excited to know my.
Yeah, get the dirt.
Anticipating.
Yeah.
Feels superficial.
Superficial, yeah. Do I care? Do I really care about you when I ask that question, or am I just looking for dirt?
Dirt.
Right, yeah. And then the last one, tell me more.
Literally felt like you just reached in and now I'm gonna grab out what's right from my heart.
Yes.
Like genuine, like eye contact, fully in it. Just wanna know the deep stuff, not just the surfacing. Like when people say I'm fine, or there's actually a lot more behind it, and it felt like that one was asking for stuff behind it.
Yes, good. I'm glad that it came across that way, because that's how I hope to connect. So that's where authenticity is really important. You can have that curiosity and you can say, oh, tell me more. But if you don't have that genuine authenticity behind it, then it's sort of an empty statement. And so curiosity, intention, and authenticity are very important as you're moving through the framework.
And all three would have their place. You just have to place them in the right part of the conversation.
Absolutely, that's a really, really good point. Yeah, because sometimes if you're sitting with your girlfriend and you know that they just got, they just had some big news, you might say, tell me more, and then that's very genuine. So you're right, it is within context.
I also feel like along with that, sometimes it takes some people a little bit more to open up deeper. So they might want to fill you in on, like the surface excitement stuff, the drama kind of stuff, and then they might actually open up about something.
Yep, absolutely, yes, which is grace for the other person, right? Letting them be where they're at. So that's a great point. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah.
What did you call these three, the three pillars of?
Boundaries, accountability, and grace, or authenticity.
The intention,
curiosity, and authenticity.
But you called those three pillars of those three things?
Those are sort of just components. They're
Okay.
just cornerstone kind of things. But the three pillars are boundaries, accountability, and grace. Yeah.
Boundaries, accountability.
Yes. Thank you for asking that question. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I'm just kind of cracking up to myself, and obviously going to get your advice, because this is really intriguing to me. I have ADHD, and so I'm learning a lot about masking, and so I have to mentally tell myself how to seem interested and not over talk somebody, and learning those social cues are very hard. This is really helpful.
Yeah. And I definitely have ADHD, and I'm pretty sure I'm probably on the spectrum.
Yeah, same.
And that's a fairly new realization for me. But this absolutely helps with that too. It helps to keep you engaged when you know you want to be involved, you really care, but your brain is squirreling, which I'm very familiar with.
And then I've been with some trainers and I've been learning people's body language and stuff to try to initiate conversation for hostage negotiations. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but learning body language and cues and stuff like that can really help. If you can learn that, you can learn how to help somebody open up about stuff. And then tell me more is kind of like an open-ended talk sentence. So instead of yes or no, where people shut down, it kind of gets them to try to open up. So I do like that a lot.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yes. And if you're looking at every interaction with intention and curiosity, then you might notice they're sitting here, they're pretty closed off, which if you're just running on autopilot might not be something you would recognize.
I just wanted to, I've for some time thought that I have ADHD, and a friend of mine referred me to a counselor trying to help me find a counselor here in town. This particular lady doesn't take my insurance, but she was kind enough to see me and help me get pointed in the right direction. But she said, and I thought that I have ADHD very definitely, but she said it's actually grief. And I'm actually going through grief right now, and I didn't even consider that, as that might be the problem. But,
There's a lot of research, and that's a whole can of worms. I could fall down that rabbit hole with my ADHD because I'm very interested in it, but there is a lot of research that indicates that things like ADHD and possibly even autism or spectrum related things are related to unresolved trauma and whatever that might be, loss, grief, things like that. Because our brains they get overwhelmed, they short circuit when we get too much stuff thrown at them. So, are you done?
No, are you done? Do you have more?
I could go on and on, but I haven't even watched the time. So.
Okay. I would like to kind of get started on the decorating part. If you have a couple of more things you want to say to wrap up, that's totally okay, and they can start kind of
Yeah, we're
Is
good.
all of this in your book though? Do you
It
talk
is in my
about
book,
that?
yes.
Okay, good.
There you go. If you would like more, Sarah, her book again is right outside.
I hope you have lots of copies out there.
Oh,
I think
God.
we're interested.
Well, we'll bring Leah up and she can kind of get us started, and then Sarah will be here. So if you guys have any more questions, like she'll be around.
Thank you so much, Sara Beth Wald. Okay, let's get crafty, everybody. Let's